5 Azure cost mistakes we see in every audit. 5 Azure cost mistakes we see in every audit. That's what we're tackling today. If you've been wondering about Azure cost optimization, stick around. Now, next up, mistake 1, skipping right-sizing kills Azure cost optimization before it starts. Right-sizing is the process of matching Azure VM sizes, storage tiers, and service plans to actual workload requirements. It sounds straightforward. It gets skipped constantly. The typical scenario: a team is under pressure to migrate on-premises infrastructure on schedule. Engineers map each server to the closest Azure VM equivalent, usually sizing up just to be safe, and push through the migration. 6 months later, those VMs are running at 8 to 12% CPU utilization. The team is paying for large general-purpose instances when small or medium SKUs would handle the same load at 40 to 60% less cost. Time pressure is the honest answer. Azure Cloud Migration Services engagements often run against tight business deadlines, and right-sizing conversations slow things down. It is faster to over-provision and fix it later. Later rarely comes. Let's talk about next up, mistake 2, no Azure landing zone before workloads go live. An Azure landing zone is the foundational environment all your workloads run inside. It covers networking architecture, identity configuration, policy enforcement, management hierarchy, and security baseline. Deploy workloads without one and you are building rooms before deciding on the floor plan. Without organized subscriptions and consistent tagging, cost allocation becomes nearly impossible. Finance cannot answer how much a specific application costs because resources are not tagged, subscriptions are not structured by workload, and shared infrastructure is lumped into one unreadable bill. Without governance guardrails, developers provision whatever they need, often in higher-cost regions or using services outside the architecture plan. An Azure landing zone is a pre-configured, policy-governed Azure environment that establishes security, networking, identity, and management baselines before any application workloads are deployed. It is not a single service. It is an architectural pattern that everything else builds on. We have written a detailed breakdown in Azure landing zones explained for mid-size companies for teams that want the full picture. Now, mistake 3, treating lift and shift as the finish line. Lift and shift to Azure gets a reputation it does not fully deserve. For many workloads, it is the right first step. You exit the data center, stop paying for hardware, and start using Azure availability zones and native redundancy. The mistake is not doing a lift and shift. The mistake is treating it as the destination. A pure IS approach captures maybe 20 to 30% of what Azure Cloud Migration Services can actually deliver. The real savings come from what happens next, moving databases to PaaS services, containerizing applications, and refactoring for Azure native services. Lift and shift works well for legacy workloads that are genuinely difficult to refactor, applications approaching end of life that need a temporary home, or any workload where downtime risk is too high to justify a rewrite. The critical word is temporary. Every lift and shift workload should have a documented path forward, modernize within 12 to 18 months, plan to retire it, or formally accept the ongoing cost of running it as is. Next up, now, mistake 4, the Azure cost optimization win most teams never take. This is the most expensive mistake on this list in raw dollar terms, and also the most straightforward to fix. If your organization runs predictable workloads on Azure and you are paying pay-as-you-go rates, you are paying roughly twice the market rate for compute. Azure reserved instances let you commit to 1-year or 3-year terms in exchange for discounts of 40 to 72% compared to pay-as-you-go pricing. A D4SV5 VM running pay-as-you-go in East US costs approximately $0.192 per hour, about $1,402 per month. The same VM on a 1-year reserved instance drops to roughly $0.117 per hour, saving around $547 per month per VM. Multiply that across 50 VMs and you are looking at more than $25,000 in annual savings from a single procurement change. Most mid-market environments we audit have fewer than 20% of their steady-state compute covered by reservations. According to Microsoft's reserved instances documentation, organizations that fully optimize reservation coverage save an average of 40% on compute costs. Next up, mistake 5, no governance or managed services after go-live. The first 4 mistakes are expensive. This one is the reason they never get fixed. Without ongoing cost governance and a structured review cadence, Azure environments drift. Resources accumulate. SKUs go unreviewed. Reservations expire without renewal. The monthly bill grows by 5 to 10% each quarter with nobody asking why. An Azure managed services provider is not a reactive help desk. The right provider runs proactive cost reviews, reservation management, policy enforcement, and workload optimization on a regular schedule. Think of it this way: there is a real difference between a financial advisor who calls once a year and one who monitors your portfolio monthly and flags anomalies before they compound. For teams without dedicated Azure expertise in-house, working with a Microsoft Azure consulting company that offers managed services is often the most cost-effective model available. The management fee is typically offset within 2 to 3 months by the savings identified during the initial engagement. Next up, now, how an Azure architecture review catches these issues early. An Azure architecture review is not a compliance checkbox. Done properly, it is a structured walkthrough of your entire environment against Microsoft's well-architected framework across 5 pillars: cost optimization, reliability, security, operational excellence, and performance efficiency. For organizations that have not done one recently, the findings are usually sobering. Not because their team did anything wrong, but because Azure environments change faster than manual review cadences can keep up with. New services get provisioned, old ones go undelete, and reservation coverage drifts as workloads scale. An Azure security assessment typically runs in parallel with cost analysis during architecture reviews. The connection is direct. Security misconfigurations often create cost problems. Over-permissive network security groups lead to data exfiltration risks that create downstream audit and remediation costs. Unencrypted storage accounts may indicate missing compliance controls, which creates regulatory exposure and the emergency costs that follow a finding. Next up, what Azure cost optimization actually looks like in practice. Azure cost optimization is not a project with a start date and end date. It is an ongoing practice. The organizations that consistently spend the least on Azure treat cost management the way they treat security, as a continuous discipline with regular reviews, clear ownership, and automated alerts for anomalies. The honest trade-off: building this practice in-house takes 6 to 12 months of iteration to get right. Most teams underestimate what it takes to maintain reservation coverage as workloads change, enforce tagging policy across development teams, and keep SKU selections current as Microsoft releases newer VM generations. Azure cost optimization consulting starts with a baseline. What are you spending today, on what, and why? That baseline phase takes 1 to 2 weeks for a mid-size environment. The work then moves through 3 phases: quick wins, structural changes, and ongoing governance. Next up, now, how to choose the right Azure consulting partner. Not every Azure migration partner approaches cost the same way. Some focus on migration speed, which has value, but leaves post-migration optimization undone. Others specialize in governance frameworks without hands-on implementation experience. Both types will consume your budget without solving the underlying problem. The questions worth asking any Azure consulting services provider before signing: do you run ongoing cost reviews or only project-based work? How do you handle reserved instance renewal and right-sizing drift as workloads change? What does your post-migration governance model look like specifically? Can you show documented examples of cost savings from previous audits, with actual numbers? Q Services is a Microsoft-certified solutions partner with dedicated practices across Azure infrastructure, app modernization, and DevOps. Our guide to evaluating an Azure consulting partner includes the full question list, including questions about delivery governance that most vendors would rather avoid. Now, let's talk about conclusion. Azure cost optimization problems do not resolve on their own. The 5 mistakes covered here: no right-sizing, missing landing zones, lift and shift treated as a final destination, ignored reserved instances, and no post-migration governance, are predictable, measurable, and fixable. Most teams reading this will recognize at least 2 or 3 of them in their own environment right now. You do not need to fix all 5 simultaneously. Start with reserved instances and right-sizing. Those two changes alone typically reduce mid-market Azure bills by 30 to 40% within 60 days. Then build toward the structural work, landing zone governance, an app modernization roadmap, and a regular Azure architecture review cadence to keep savings from eroding over time. If you want a second set of eyes on your Azure environment, Q Services runs focused Azure cost optimization consulting engagements that typically pay for themselves in the first billing cycle. Reach out and we will tell you honestly what we find.